than anything else, we need to revolutionize our own minds. And the only way that we're going to do that is with information. And that's the reason why this country spends more money on information than anything else. Please repeat after me. We're an African people. We're from our homeland. We're out of our names, our languages, our cultures, our religions, our womanhood, our manhood, our sisterhood, our brotherhood, and our self-respect. But we shall rise, never to fall again. Up, ye mighty race. You can accomplish what you will. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Hug the person again and let them know you're still glad that they're an African.
Realized we were eating ourselves to death. Sugar runs in the family. Diabetes runs in the family. Damn it, that's because you're eating the same stuff that your mama ate, your grandmama ate. Change your diet and you change your relationship to health. It's Sesame Street simple. It's not rocket science. Change your diet, change the intake of the things that come into your body. You change the chemistry of your body. It is simple. But we've been conditioned to be a people who are moved by emotion and taste, appetites. And this is a false way of living. This is a faulty way of living. This is a disastrous way of living because, as Brother Albert says, next year we'll have a net worth of over $1 trillion. We'll have a net worth of the 7th largest nation in the United States. In the world, Spain. We got all this money. What do we own? What institutions do we have? So we're at a point in our lives where we can no longer afford to act like we don't know. Because folk have a plan for us. They don't need us anymore because they got Hispanics to do what we used to do. So they can escalate the process of us killing ourselves. There's a chapter in Tom Morell's book called Homicide. Why black folk kill each other. And the numbers are startling. You all see it right here in Brooklyn. Every single week you're reading stories about black folk who are killing other black folk for no reason whatsoever. There's a chapter in there about comedians, which he refers to as the new neo-coons. Why the laugh is always on us. Why we're the only people who laugh at things that are embarrassing. We're the only people who will pay money to listen to comedians curse you out. Every other word is profanity. B and H and S and all of this nonsense. And we laugh as if it's funny. So we've got to do a serious reevaluation of what it means to be the descendant of kings and queens and artisans and craft persons and nobles. And either we're going to start acting like it or we need to shut the hell up and stop pimping our ancestors. Because they don't deserve to be pimped that way. We got the best in us, and it's time for us to start acting like it. I want to share this good news with you to wind this session down, because I can talk about this stuff, forever. But I just want to encourage you all to go out and buy Brainwashed by Tom. I'm not even pushing my own books. Go out and buy Brainwashed. This is a magnificent book. The first 11 chapters, he talks about the problems that we're confronted with. In the last chapter, the 12th chapter, he deals with solutions to the problems. Right? So this is an unusual book in that regard. It is, I shared with Tom last week that in my humble estimation, this is the 21st century version of the miseducation of the Negro. The brainwashing of the Negro. And he gives us the blueprint for how we can begin to dry clean our minds. All right? Chapter 12 talks about using the media, the most powerful form of mass communication, mental manipulation ever devised. How we can use the media, the internet, social media networks, cell phones, web pages, YouTube, how we can use this to spread truth and light all over our communities. It's a powerful tool, and it's cheap. So we're going to give you some suggestions as to how you can become involved in this process of freeing your mind. I love the fact that he begins the book with a quote from Malcolm in the introduction. And that quote is a quote that you all have heard dozens and dozens of times. You've been misled. You've been had. You've been took. You've been brainwashed. And it's time for you to dry clean your mind. You've got to do it. White man's not going to do it for you. Your mama's not going to do it for you. Your daddy's not going to do it for you. Jesus ain't going to do it for you. You've got to do it because you have within you the power and the ability to determine your own destiny. It is your birthright. It is in your DNA. Once you understand that, then it becomes a simple thing to do. So let me share with you this news that I'm very excited about. The name of this foundling father. They bear his name in order to ensure that his legacy will never be forgotten. That is why you name institutions and organizations. It's one example of the importance of memory and culture. The Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. is the oldest cultural institution in the city. This building contains the largest collection of knowledge in the world. It has in its collections over 25 million artifacts. It receives on average 13,000 items every single week. It is an ever-expanding collection of images, knowledge, and information. The idea of a congressional library was first suggested by James Madison in 1783. Madison, as you all know, was the father of the U.S. Constitution. Madison understood very clearly that if the United States, he understood very clearly the words of the Roman philosopher Cicero, who said that to not know what happened before one was born is to always remain a child. So, if the United States of America was to take its place among the pantheon of great nations, then she had to have access of all of the knowledge of the great nations that preceded her. So in 1800, President John Adams signed the bill authorizing the establishment of the Library of Congress. And he purchased 740 books from booksellers in England. And in an effort to create a national identity, America's founding fathers returned to their motherland, England, to access their ancestral memory. They read books on English history in order to find their way. They also read books on ancient Rome. Why? Because England, or Great Britain, was given its foundation by Rome. Julius Caesar conquered Great Britain and named the country Britain. They studied Rome, the nation that gave birth to England. They studied books on ancient Greece, the nation that gave birth to Rome, and by extension, the United States of America. So this multicultural heritage has been artistically integrated and expressed historically in the Greco-Roman architecture that we find in Washington, D.C., and every major city throughout the United States. The architecture of all of your state buildings is Greco-Roman architecture, cultural capital, and health. If you don't know who you are, you won't be able to understand how to live for life. And you will spend your time and energy living a life in which you're already dead, you just haven't died yet. It's time for us to act. So these are action-oriented study groups. What we're doing is coming together to study 3 texts. The first text is Dr. Hilliard's book, Savor, The Reawakening of the African Mind. The second text is my book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. The third text is Dr. Hilliard's DVD, Master Keys. So that will be our curriculum for understanding the 4 golden ages of Kemet, to be able to put that knowledge into historical context, and then once you have mastered that information, we then want to train people to be able to go out into communities and to teach this information. Take the schools and churches and organizations and meetings so that we can begin to tell our story. Right? We want to be able to provide you with the information. We want to be able to provide you with the slides so that you can tell the story. You ain't got to make nothing up. You don't have to argue with white folks. You just tell the truth. And the truth will free our minds and our behinds. And so then, the whole essence of this project, we're future-oriented. We're action-oriented. You all know this man, right? Will Smith. Will Smith is the man in Hollywood right now. Time magazine referred to Will Smith as the $2 billion man. Everything he touches turns to gold. Will Smith.
What did he get back?
Brother, Will Smith, his wife, and Jay-Z produced Failure. All right? A serious piece. If you ain't seen Failure, brother, you slacking. Go see Failure. It's a powerful story. They're using their money and doing what they can. They're giving back in many different ways. They can't do it overtly because they'll lose their job. All right? They're using their money just like many actors and actresses, entertainers during the civil rights era. They couldn't come out publicly and denote and donate money to the movement. But they did their thing so they can keep their job, keep their profile, make some money, and they finance a lot of the work. So we got to be clear about who's doing what, and we need to kind of temper our critiques and criticisms of folk until we check them out thoroughly. We got to stop gossiping and stop tearing each other down, because that's all part of the brainwashing. Right? We're standing on the threshold of a new point in time in history. We ain't got time to be fighting each other. Right? It's time to do the work and work with people who have demonstrated that they are worth working with. Right? So Will Smith currently has in production a film in which he's going to play this man. The film is called The Last Pharaoh. He's going to play Taharka. Taharka was the last major king of the 25th dynasty. So what we are proactively preparing ourselves to do is to train hundreds of people who have an understanding of ancient Kemet and the 25th dynasty. We're going to arm them with the information that we are currently uncovering right now, so that when that movie comes out, we can have thousands of people go to the theater the first weekend and support that film so that it could be #1 in the box office. If black folk, in our foolishness, could make Medea Goes to Jail the #1 movie in America, then we deserve to make The Last Pharaoh the #1 movie for at least 2 weeks running. I'm tired of seeing Medea Goes to Jail, Medea gets hemorrhoids, Medea acts a fool. That is foolishness. We are paying for foolishness. We're paying to put ourselves back into mental incarceration. So we should be willing to stand up now and pay for our liberation. This is an opportunity, brother, for us to stand up for our own liberation. We got to be forward thinking, all right? So then part of our goal is to begin to initiate that process and to get folk ready for when this thing comes down the pipe. Every place we go. Everything we need to do, anything we want to do is already inside of us. Stop looking outside yourself.
Yes.
You are carrying within you the DNA of all of your ancestors. The greatest men and women who ever walked this planet live in you right now. So it's time to tap into those cultural memories, those ancestral memories. Stop complaining. Stop talking about the white man. Stop talking about the white man, because every time you talk about him, you give him power. As the brother was saying, stop spending your money with folk who don't respect you. Stop thinking and talking about people who don't respect you. Talk about yourself. Give yourself that respect. Give yourself that power. And you'll find that just by changing your thought pattern, changing your conversation, you change the power dynamic. And that's what time it is. We are standing on the threshold of a new era of humanity. And we cannot afford to miss the boat this time, brothers and sisters, because if we do, I don't know if our ancestors are going to give us another chance. All right? So take down the web address. You can go to the website. You can right now make a tax-deductible contribution to the Ancient Restoration Project. I'm calling our folk out. If Dr. Lena Piszczykova can spend her life savings trying to tell your story, y'all can at least afford to spend $10 a month to show your gratitude. So let me put something in perspective for you. what happened to African people during the Ma'afa, during the 444 years of the Ma'afa, from 1444 to 1888, conservatively speaking, over 50 million African men, women, and children died. That is the equivalent of September the 11th happening every day for 44 years and 8 months. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves is, who is responsible for perpetrating those deaths? Have we identified those people? And if we have, then what are we going to do to ensure that that process does not continue? See, it puts the onus on us. Because once we begin to understand very clearly how we got into the circumstances that we find ourselves in, then we can determine how we're going to change that relationship so that we can determine what our future is going to be, so that we can determine what the future of our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren is going to be. And so the reality is, if we aren't thinking on that level, if we aren't thinking 7 generations into the future, 150 years, we're not thinking. Everything that we think, say, and do, every moment of our lives determines the quality of life for the next 150 years. That's power. That is too much power to leave in the hands of BET. That is too much power to leave in the hands of institutions that have demonstrated that they don't have your best interest at heart. So it doesn't do a whole lot of good to complain about people who don't mean you any good.
Of the 21st of December, the birth of the sun was commemorated. At that time, the sun was in the zodiacal sign of Capricorn, which was known as the stable of Aegeus. So the infant sun god was said to have been born in a stable. Shining brightly on the meridian was Sirius, the star from the east, while rising in the east was Virgo, the Virgin, the astrological constellation of Virgo, the Virgin, and the line of the horizon was passing through her center. The whole concept of a virgin birth is written in the stars. To the right of Sirius was Orion, the great hunter, with 3 stars in his belt. And those stars lie in a straight line and point towards Sirius. And in the ancient times, these 3 stars were known as the 3 kings or the 3 magi. So all of this stuff that has been inculcated into Christian lore was based upon astronomical knowledge that was practiced thousands of years before the birth of Jesus the Christ. So if Constantine had this desire to conquer the rest of the world and to impose a new religious ideology on the minds of the people that he conquered, then one of the first things that he had to do was to ensure that he could minimize people's resistance to this new concept. So he selected a date that they had already set aside as a holiday and imposed his holiday on theirs. After their children died, they will forget the holiday of their ancestors and celebrate the holiday of the people who had just recently mentally enslaved them. So in the winter solstice, or Christmas, the sun is in the southernmost position of the sky. And after that time, it begins to travel northward across the ecliptic, and then at the vernal equinox, or Easter, it passes over the celestial equator. This passing over the sun from the south to the north of the equator was the origin of the festival of Passover. The whole idea of Passover literally talks about the sun, the S-U-N, passing over the equator. All they did was to change the terminology and make the S-U-N the S-O-N, and had the Passover. At that particular point in time, the sun was resurrected in the northern hemisphere. And so it was said that the sun, the S-O-N, was resurrected. That's where all of these concepts and ideas come from. When this event was recorded 3,000 years ago, the sun passing over the equator 3,000 years ago, the sun was situated in the sign of Aries, the ram or the lamb. And so it became a symbol of the sacrificial lamb, the Passover lamb. All of this stuff is directly related to aspects of astronomy. This time of year coincides with the spring equinox, which is also symbolic of the resurrection and the return of life. During the spring, life literally springs forth from the black earth. Vegetation comes back into existence. It is a time of year when birds build their nests and lay eggs, and animals then give birth to the young, which represents a continuation of the life cycle. It is a time of rebirth and regeneration on the earth. There were two prominent symbols that were used in ancient Africa to represent this time, this transformation, this regeneration of life. And those two symbols, particularly symbols that were used in Kemet, were symbols of the egg, which represents the potential for new life that exists within this container, as well as the rabbit. The rabbit was a symbol of abundant birth. Why? Because the rabbits have the ability to produce multiple births in a very short period of time. The rabbit was a symbol that was always associated with fertility. And so it was these two symbols in the newly emerging Christian religion that led to the myth of the Easter bunny and the Easter eggs. Think about it. Rabbits don't lay eggs, do they? What's the significance of that? Why do we every Easter talk about the Easter bunny, hide the Easter eggs? What is that all about? That is us in our ignorance playing out the celebration of the return of the life cycle, which occurs in the spring. Think about Easter. December the 25th is always Thanksgiving. It's always Christmas, correct? December the 25th is always Christmas. But when is Easter? Easter is a movable holiday. Why? Because Easter is always the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. It's all connected to celestial phenomena that takes place in the heavens. It has nothing to do with the story that has been imposed on your subconscious mind. Everything happens for a reason. Do you understand? Everything happens for a reason. So with this thing called a mind, you can begin to tune in certain levels of consciousness which will change your thinking and your behavior. Adolf Hitler had a habit of holding some of his most important speeches during the evening. Why? Because Hitler, who was a profound student of metaphysical and esoteric phenomena, knew that in the evening, lesser minds are more susceptible or more easily influenced by powerful minds. It is a time when your mind is more susceptible to influence. So if it's your mind, then you might as well assume responsibility for influencing it. It's yours. What you gonna do with it? Over the past 28 years rather, Kwanzaa has evolved as an instrument for spiritual transformation. By that I mean it allows us to celebrate our African heritage during a season of high spiritual energy. The challenge for us, if you understand the 7 principles that we are directed to focus our consciousness on, are principles that can be and should be manifested every day of your life. So the timing of this particular celebration is of significant importance. Understand the principles and incorporate them in your life. But at the same time that we have grown to celebrate Kwanzaa, there are those outside of the community who wish to commercialize it. They want to commercialize it. Why? Because it will allow them to co-opt your energy and begin to steer you in another direction. See, this whole thing that we call life at this particular point in time in history is a struggle for power, is a struggle for energy. It is a struggle for consciousness. I do believe that we are struggling for our souls. And either you are going to realize that and be an active participant in seeing to it that you stay focused on your goal. Focused on the goals of your children and family. Focus on the goals for your community. That's what the objective is. But those who understand the potential that exists within the mind, the body, and the spirit of African people are afraid of you all even becoming aware of this reality. And so roadblocks will be placed in your way at every turn in order to make it difficult for you to do what God created you here on earth to do. Very simple process. Life is not complicated. We complicate it, we make it complicated by turning our backs on certain principles that our ancestors gave us. The knowledge is already right before your very eyes. The question is, do you have the eyes to see it? They are speaking to you. Your ancestors are speaking to you all the time. The question is, can you hear them? If you understand who we are and where we come from, if you understand the nature of the universe in which we live, then you can become an instrument through which the ancestors will speak. A couple of years ago, we had Teofilo Obenga speaking for us in Washington, D.C. One of the most profound things that Obenga said that evening, and looking out into the audience at us, and talking about the spiritual nature of the people of ancient Kemet, the spiritual nature of African people, he said, looking at us, that we are the ancestors. They live in each one of you. The question is, do you realize who you have inside of you, what spirits you have around you? Truth stands right before us. It speaks to us at night. But in order for us to uncover the truth, we must do, as James Weldon Johnson suggested, we must be true to ourselves, true to our God, and true to our native land. That's the solution. That's the answer. It doesn't require a whole lot of work. She didn't have the honor of bearing him a child, an heir to the throne. So as the spirit of Asar saw his wife and saw her in her grief, the spirit of Asar came and impregnated his wife. And then 9 months later, the virgin Aset gave birth to her son Heru, who was born to avenge the murder of his father. Next slide. Heru then becomes the model of the 15 Christs who lived in history. Heru was born on December the 25th. Heru was born of a virgin. Heru was born to complete his father's work and to restore his father's kingdom on earth. Heru was, on a deeper level, Heru was the reincarnation of his father, who was reborn in order to continue his work. The story of Heru and his uncle Set set the standard for the historical battle between the forces of good and evil. Next slide shows you a photograph from the temple of Edfu. So in the temple of Edfu, which is dedicated to Heru, you see carved on the interior of the retaining wall 14 panels which depict the battle between Set and Heru. And in this battle, Heru takes the form of a hawk and he spears Set, who is depicted in the shape of a hippopotamus. And he spears him in each part of his body that is related to a part of Asar's body that was dismembered. Next slide shows you a detail of Set. Shows him being speared in the nose, shows his feet being bound in chains. Then after Set was defeated, then Heru became the legitimate heir to the throne of ancient Kemet. And after his victory, Heru, next slide, took the form of a falcon, flew into heaven, and met with his father, told his father of his victory over Set. And upon that meeting, his father, Asar, was resurrected from the dead, was restored, his spirit was restored, and he became the Lord of the afterworld, or the Lord of the underworld, also referred to as the Lord of judgment. And then Heru came back down to earth to continue ruling in his father's name. So father and son ruled in tandem. The son, Heru, ruled over the physical world. His father, Asar, ruled over the spiritual world, the transphysical or the metaphysical world. They ruled in tandem. Next slide. This is an image of the resurrected Asar, who is recorded in history as the world's first resurrected savior, as the world's first resurrected personality. I might add that this story was written in Nubia over 6,000 years before the birth of Jesus the Christ. All right, so let's put it in context so we understand from whence these myths have evolved. And let's understand these myths. Next slide shows you another symbol that was built in Kemet that represented the resurrection of Asar. Right? This is a symbol called a tekken. And it was erected in front of the temples in Kemet to represent the resurrection. It is derived from the Greek words okos and the word nemen. The word okos means house or household. The word nemen means to manage. So we've got to begin to look at how we're dealing with this body, the mind and the body and the spirit that makes us who and what we are. See, because if you can't control your body, you can't control your mind and your spirit. You can't control your mind and your spirit, you can't control your body. And in this society, any person who can't control their body is considered an invalid. Huh? You know what you do with people in this society who can't control their body? You call them invalids. And what is an invalid? An invalid is someone who is invalid. Huh? Who has no use, who serves no function whatsoever. And so, I want to ask you all this evening, how many of you fall into this category? How many of you are not managing your household in a manner that allows you to function as a whole, complete, and sound person? Let me do a little survey and ask you some questions. And you can respond just by raising your hands. How many of you, within the last 30 days, have done any of the following? How many of you all have disrespected? Time talking about Kemet, you know, wanting to claim wearing ankhs and the Kemetic jewelry and take on Kemetic names. It's beautiful that we want to
claim that aspect of ourselves, but we can't just take one part and forget another part. See, because these people were talking about words, they were talking about symbols, they were talking about transforming consciousness. You can't play with this stuff. You can't do it halfway. This is real. These are serious issues. Serious forces of reality that we're talking about here. Not some just frivolous thing that you play with simply because it's the fad of the decade. How many of you all within the last 30 days have bought something that you knew was stolen? Huh? Bought something hot? Huh? Now you know, let me take a moment, because see, I'm not trying to sit up here and speak from a self-righteous posture or anything like that. But let me just share an experience with you, a personal experience that helped me begin to understand some of the stuff that I'm talking about. Because I'm not just talking about philosophical things that would be nice for you to do if you want to live a better quality of life. I'm talking about some real things that you need to be aware of if you want to live a better quality of life. Personally, grew up in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago, all right? So there were always folk in our community who were junkies and what have you, who were breaking into people's homes, stealing televisions and leather coats and stereos, huh? I always came by, hey man, I got television, color television, $25 is yours, all right? And when you get caught up in that mindset, you say, yeah, I need a television, $25, I'll buy the television. And you aren't even conscious of the ramifications of your actions. See, anytime you steal from somebody, if you truly understand the concepts of ma'at, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, but if you truly understand the concepts of ma'at, this whole thing of reciprocity, you cannot do something to somebody without that same thing coming back to you. You can't hide from it. Because this force is real, it's more real than gravity. It's pervasive. It's everywhere. And when you begin to understand the essence of these forces and how they work in your life, then you can begin to make choices. Choices that will affect the quality of your life. And if you make the right choices, I dare say this evening, that these choices will begin to insulate you from the pressures of racism and white supremacy.